That's one less thing for the
Well,
speakers.
we were sitting there.
Okay, that's great.
So it says just 7:31, so when it says at 25:02, I'll introduce you and hand over. We have at this point nearly 50 people logged in.
Oh my God.
There's actually 50 people. You can see at the bottom of the screen participants. And then
I don't think I want to.
The 50s.
Oh, good grief! There's lots of people. There are people I know there.
I'd like to think so.
Yeah. And many people I do not know, but that's all good.
Yes. Yeah.
Yep. I see the other half as well there. That's okay. I'm not going to look any further. It's too upsetting.
Yeah, Catherine's just said, "Hi everyone, looking forward to tonight's talk. You'll be great, Rena." So that's from Catherine. So, hi, David.
Oh God.
You froze.
Well, it's a photograph. I thought that was him actually going.
No. Yeah. So.
Must have just clicked on to get this in.
So a couple of minutes yet, Rena, and I'll say.
It's okay.
Maybe it comes up.
Yeah. Let's see. The wrong distance away from you, that.
Is it?
Sharpen.
Get further away.
So at this point in time, it says 52 participants. It's great. Yeah,
I think it helped whenever Aidan came on and publicised it, and Eileen publicised it. So there's been a lot of pushing of it.
Well, I mean, we've had to be more proactive with lockdown and everything. So there's been a lot of kind of sweeps of Facebook and social media and things to trying to tell people what we're doing, because so much of it's online, now, and fingers crossed, we'll start later this year. We'll start getting out back into the field and back into lecture rooms, and but it's been very, very successful. Our kind of digital projects. I mean, the lectures, the conferences, a lot of work for Duncan, of course, and for the contributors. But it means that we can keep on disseminating the information and putting out new talks. So, right. Okay, I'm going to introduce you, Rena, and then I'll hand over to you now. Okay. And then after I'm finished, hopefully Duncan will make me disappear, and it'll just be you on the screen.
Fingers crossed.
Okay, so good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the first UAS evening lecture for 2022. Our lecturer tonight is Dr. Rena Maguire. Rena studied archaeology at Queen's University Belfast, and she graduated with a BA Hons in 2013. She was awarded an MSc in 2014 and a PhD in 2018. She has worked for the Historic Environment Division, Department for Communities, and in consultancy, and she is currently a visiting research fellow at Queen's University Belfast. She has published extensively on ancient equitation and its associated technology, and is an enthusiastic horsewoman. And Dr. Maguire has recently published Irish Late Iron Age equestrian equipment in its insular and continental context, and this is publication number 2 in the Queen's University Belfast Irish Archaeological Monograph series, and it looks like a fantastic book, Rena. Her new monograph is the first practical archaeological study of Iron Age lorinery, if that's the right word, the metal parts for bits, bridles, spurs, and other horse apparel. That be right, Rena?
Yep, that's right.
And so tonight we're delighted that Rena is going to kick off our 2022 lecture program with a talk on For the Want of a Horse, the Rider Was Lost, an introduction to Ireland's late Iron Age equitation. So I'll hand you over to Dr. Rena McGuire.
Thank you, Rory. Thanks very much. Thanks very much for having me on this lecture series. I've been basically going for about the past 10 years researching this. So while there's an awful lot more to it, I can only give you here this evening in a very limited time an overview of what the book is. But there's an awful lot more involved. So this is only going to be flashes of research. And at the moment, research is now moving beyond that as well. But I hope that by the time I finish this evening, I hope that you have got an idea of why horsey archaeology is actually so important, and not just to do with bones, but to do with the lorinery, which is a terminology you'll hear me use a lot. It describes the small metal pieces of equipment that you'll use on a bridle, saddle, etc., which is an art in itself, to be honest with you. Thank you indeed. That's pretty much, once they let me, I'll start talking the lecture properly. I take it on the speed. I've not been made to disappear yet. So most people know about the Iron Age is one of the more mysterious and enigmatic periods of time. The late great Professor Raftery referred to it as the invisible people who couldn't actually ever get into view because they left so little. And whenever I started approaching this first, there was an old rhyme that came across my mind, and it was, for the want of a nail, the shoe was lost. For the want of a shoe, the horse was lost. For the want of a horse, the rider was lost. For the want of a rider, the battle was lost. And all for the want of a horseshoe nail. And for the Iron Age, we have lots and lots of horse equipment, tack, as you hear me call it. But we don't have really anything else. They left nothing else. So I approached this in a very different way, which was using a blend of stableyard knowledge. So anybody there who has been around horses in any capacity, this is all going to be very small potatoes to you. This is all going to be Iron Age Pony Club. But for those, I'm not making any presumptions about anybody's knowledge. So I'm going to take you through wee bit by wee bit. So on with the show. Why would anybody want to study equestrian equipment? That's the first thing which this talk's going to approach. What results have I turned up in these past few years? And maybe most importantly, what does it actually tell us about the Iron Age in Ireland? And after all that, where do we actually go with it all? So that's pretty much what this talk is going to cover. So the one great thing about examining any form of tack of any era is the fact that it doesn't really change a great deal over the centuries. The horse, unlike the dog, is always there with humans. And yet there's been so few that have examined equipment to do with that journey. So the great thing is that whenever we get very, very old bits, especially or hackamores or any kind of equipment that's used on the horse, it means that we can actually compare things, compare like with like. We know what use wear is going to look like. And because we know what use wear is going to be like, we can tell if somebody's good with a horse. We can sometimes even tell if they're riding or they're driving. We can tell also about their culture. We get an idea of their travel infrastructure, their mobility, because wherever the horse is, there is mobility. The image over in the corner there is from a friend, Ivan, who has recreated a chariot in Santoshta culture, which has been an amazing thing for him to be doing. But because of the differences of maybe decoration on bits, it also gives us an idea of what these people identify as, what images they want to portray, because the decoration of anything that's just functional always tells an awful lot about what people want us to know as the observer, whether it was 5,000 years ago or 5 years ago. It tells us very much what they want us to take away from it. So it gives us a really, really good background of people and their transport and how they saw themselves. But it is very much for the elite. It just has to be said. So one surefire way to piss me off is to refer to anything as horse furniture or horse gear. If you ever want to come around any stable I'm in and use those words, I'll just get the popcorn, I'll watch. It's not something that's ever used. So I'll just give a wee quick word about the terminology that I'll use in this talk. Tack is the all-encompassing term for anything that's fitted onto a horse. You've got driving harness. Harness would tend to be what you would use for driving a cart or a buggy or a chariot. But with horse riding, it's mostly tack. And the little components, like the mouthpieces, bits, martingales, etc., again, are made via laurinary and can be referred to as laurinary within it. But the overall picture of it is tack. So we've got that out of the road. Now, you'll see here two lovely horses. On the right side, you've got Junior, and on the left side, you've got Pegasus. An ambitious name for him, bless him. You'll see that they're in two different disciplines. Junior is using a very, very simple, I'll try and use this little light thing here. You'll see here, he's using a very, very simple, what's called an egg butt snaffle, which is very common to use if you're riding. And he has no noseband because he's got a sensitive nose. However, if I go over here to Mr. Peggy, you will see that he has in quite a complex looking bit, a cheek piece. And this is actually a cheek piece called a Liverpool. And it's what you use in driving. If you go into a saddle, right, shop or a tack shop, you'll see a massive selection of bits. And they're all made for different reasons. Some of them are to fix horses' bad habits. Some of them are there because they make a horse perform better. It prefers it. And others because certain disciplines, like showing, for example, have a set idea of what they want the horse to wear. So there's all different types of bits for all different situations. And that gives us as archaeologists a really, really good head start, because when we actually can see what people of the past are using, it gives us an idea of what they want the horse to accomplish. So we're immediately starting to get an idea of what's inside their minds that they actually want, what performance they want to achieve at the end of it. Now, I'm saying about different tasks and different temperaments, and people of the past were no different than we are today in wanting to solve these problems with the horses. And once you can look at the tack in the past, you can then start to tell a lot about the rider or the driver and their life as much as that of the horse. So one of the first things whenever I approached this was my undergrad dissertation was on the Irish Y piece, which I'm not really going to touch a great deal on because it's been published now so much that you can read about it in the Mania 2014, etc. I think even in Irish Archaeology, just there at the end of last year. I'm going to concentrate a wee bit more in this talk upon bits and snaffles. So the first thing that I did was to start looking at every single Iron Age bit, or what might have been Iron Age, some of them weren't, in Ireland, and also those that were held elsewhere. And also to get a picture of where they were in the scheme of things. I looked in other countries as well. I looked in Britain, looked across the continent, and started to make a big picture. And that's pretty much what's in the book. So what I was looking for whenever I was looking at the stuff that was locally within the Ulster Museum, and thank you, Greer, and also in the NMI, and thank you to everybody there, was about use wear, both micro and macro. I wanted to see where the pressure was, where the regular use was. I wanted to see where the burnishing was of rain, leather, or fabric, as it may be, against that shines up metal. I wanted to see where there are bite marks on the mouthpiece. I wanted to see if there was damage. Was that damage pre or post depositional? Was it deliberate, or was it just because the casting was crap? Those were all the things that I wanted to look at. And you'll see a picture there, right here, of a beautiful type E bit from Westmeath. And it's very, very ornate. But you can see here, you've got the link that joins on. And if you look down here at this modern verband end, you'll see it's got a little link in the center. These are what's called double jointed snaffles, because you can get a single joint like this, which you'll see a lot across Europe, in Latin Europe. And you'll see occasionally in Britain as well. And you'll see it in Viking. But double jointed snaffles, you'll get a few on the continent, in northern France and Belgium, but you won't really, and Ireland, but you won't get them anywhere else. And there's also a mullen mouth, just to show you, these are all modern bits, and this is the late Iron Age one. So the other things I wanted to investigate was what contexts were they found and what kind of depositions, and how did they compare to the equipment that we had solid dates for. Remember, we hadn't got solid dates for these at all. Whenever we were starting out, we knew sort of Iron Agey sort of somewhere, and that was one of the things that had to be nailed down. I did also look at metal analysis using PXRF, and the results of that are quite dramatic. Some of them actually were so dramatic that I didn't trust them and had to go back and look at them again. So therefore, that will be published separately, not too distant future. Fingers crossed. So, what exactly are these? Now, the bit that I'm showing there, that beautiful, beautiful looking thing here, is a type E bit, and it's over in Alnwick in the north of England, who were very kind to let me get photographs of it that I could use, etc. And they've been pretty amazing. So the structure were basically identical to modern double jointed snaffles. That was the first thing that was noted. I just want to show you something here. Along the top are modern joints that hold the two cannons of the mouthpiece together. You'll notice that these are the ancient ones down here. That one's not a very good photograph, I'm sorry about that, but you'll notice how very, very similar they all have parallels in the modern world. The French link, you've got a Dr. Bristol, which lies flat on a horse's tongue. You've got the lozenge, which is placed in a double jointed snaffle if a horse likes to fidget with its tongue, and if it's antsy, basically. And you've got the dog bone again as well. Now, just a wee note as well here, which I'll point out. You've got, I've seen some papers by other archaeologists who obviously weren't that horsey, that they've been measuring the full length of the bit. Yeah, that's great. We need to know it. But more importantly, for a whole host of reasons, we need to know the functional mouthpiece size. And that's the part that's inside the horse's mouth, because that tells us what size the mouth is. And there's been quite a lot of scientific studies that tell us about the size of the horse's palate will actually, inside the mouth, it gives it a reasonable indication of the actual size of the horse. We have no known Irish bone assemblages of skulls that we could measure that date to the Iron Age. We've got none. So this was using functional mouthpiece of each bit was probably the best way that we could actually suggest the range of sizes of equids that we were actually looking at. You must do as they say as a good master. If I'm measuring, I go from where it's going to be out at the horse's cheeks. So on these bits here, this part here, I hope you can see here, is inside the horse's mouth. And this part here, the decorated part, is outside. It sits outside the cheek. And these wee parts here were actually an early attempt to create a lip guard of some kind. Not a very good one, perhaps, but these bits are, in fact, the most sophisticated in prehistory. And this shape of bit wouldn't actually come to be remade until the end of the 20th century. So it's quite an achievement that they made something so distinctive. These bits could be potentially used as part of a show bridle. Now, one of the things which was noted on looking at all of them was that the use wear on both sides of these little apertures that allow the cheek rings to sit in, the use wear was by and large for so many, almost 90%, was even, which would suggest riding. There's a couple of things which I would ask a question about. These are potentially driving, and that's coming to a journal of Irish Archaeology, fingers crossed, near you very soon, hopefully. But that's something that I've been working with a couple of colleagues on to try and identify a potential of driving in late Iron Age Ireland. So, trying to move this forward. Yeah, so how did these bridles fit? By looking at the use wear. The drawing here, we've got the rain, granted, is me pretty much going with, I think, a guesstimate you would call it. But you'll notice here, you've got your little mouthpiece sitting out. You've got your big cheek ring attaching into the bridle. I put on a couple of wee filera pretty studs there because they like their stuff like that. I have the only way in which we worked out that the Y-piece could actually fit perfectly, allowing for the bends and the shafts of them, was to actually create what we call a grackle, a crossed over noseband with a gag bit, which would keep everything in place. Do I think that these were used very often? No, I don't. I think that they were very much there to show how very flashy they were. The one thing, as I say, that was amazing to find is all of the bends of the shafts of the white pieces all were slightly different to cater for the different shape. What this is a bridle, which we would now call a bosal and a macate. And here, being modelled by the lovely dancer, who's my friend Summer's pony, you'll see the construction of what would be the equivalent of a Y-piece. Only this is how we do it now. Well, one of the ways we do it now. And then you've got a neck rein. And what I will say to you is that because of the emphasis upon what we call neck reining, which is using one rein, very, very low, it would suggest somebody who needed to cut corners, almost like cattle reining, would be your, that kind of very, very fast. If you look at a polo match, you'll see this kind of bridle used today. If you look at gauchos in the, like Argentina, they're using the same kind of neck reining because it's all about maneuverability and riding very low with one hand and leaving the other free. So that's the first thing we start learning about the Iron Age in Ireland, is that cattle raids may in fact have been fact rather than just legend. So I'd said they're about size of the mouthpiece, the functional mouthpiece. Now, if I was to take you into any saddlery shop, they'll have a wee chart like this one here. Now, there's always going to be that one horse that's slightly different. We've all known that really, really tall horse that has this really teeny tiny mouth inside. And we've all known this tiny pony who has got a head like a bull, and it takes a much bigger bit than what you'd imagine. Living, breathing creatures were all different. You'll always get these wee outliers. But if I went in and I had said, okay, humor me, this is my dream happening here. I would go into a saddler and say, my mummy has bought me a pony, and I believe it's about 14 hands high. What size of bit should I leave in provisionally? So they will look down and they'll say, I think I'd be happy with a 4.5 inch. And we still actually quite often use inches because it's the one thing which even I have to confess, I struggle to think of centimeters with bits. So I go, yeah, 4.5 inch, we're good. If you need any more, come back to us. And that's the kind of table you'd use here. So based upon that, and with all the different bits that were in various clusters that we measured for what size they were, you get this table here, which shows you've got a couple of really tiny ponies, very little chaps of about 9 or 10 hands. You've got, creeping up a wee bit, about 10 of small ponies, small being about 12, 13 hands high. And by the way, whenever I came to do this for Britain, that's actually where the bulk of their pony size is for the same period of time. You don't have an awful lot of medium size, but for a decent sized pony of about 14 hands, that is where most of them are, and that you've got about 25 specimens that rank into that size. You've got a couple for cobs, which would be about 14 hands and upwards and big heads. And you've got a couple of larger horses. So I put these on a map to see if there was any pattern to where they might be. And the purple are the big horses. The blue are the clusters of medium-sized large ponies, 14 hands or thereabouts. And the yellow are the little teeny tiny lads. There may be something in that because of indigenous breeds. For example, the Cushendall pony, which probably came from something earlier, and more importantly, the elusive Irish hobby. So it may in fact be reflective of these smaller animals up here. That needs more research. But now, where were these things actually being found? There's always been this presumption, like any form of metalwork in Ireland, that you're going to find it in bogs. That literally was only half the story. Roughly half of provenance, and remember, we don't have a lot of provenances, were found in peat bogs. The other were in commonage, where maybe there'd been a mound or an earthwork or something of that kind. But there's also recycled, what I refer to in the monograph as being heroic sites, which are sites that are mentioned in the great heroic sagas of the Tyne or the Labar de Hudra or the Annals of the Four Masters, places that have connections to interesting things going on. And that's in the monograph, for want of a better word, I used the word heroic. But also the weird thing was early ecclesiastical sites did actually have a statistically interesting representation of equestrian site. So I don't know whether it was something maybe that Christianity had appropriated. I don't know. That's one. I'll come to that towards the end. Anyway, with the help of Dr. Will McGarry and my daughter, who both practice the dark arts of GIS, I threw up some GIS models. I was interested in seeing heat maps and kernel density as to how related things actually were to each other. And I don't think you can really miss this great big bullseye up at the mouth of the Bann and down a wee bit for hotspots. Now, yes, I know that there was a lot of dredging happened there in the 1930s, but regardless of whether you think of dredging or not, the stuff was still there. It was still somewhere between Barmouth and the opening of Lough Neagh. So I think one of the questions that maybe is asked is the stuff coming in from Scotland, or is it scrap metal going out to Scotland? No way of telling, no way of knowing, but it's a massive hotspot, as you can see. Predictably, North Dublin with Fermanagh, of course, is another hotspot, with a few more pieces that, God bless them, the NMI have been able to actually say exist. I think that's probably read by this point as well. It's the worst of doing any monograph, it's never finished. There's always something new. Somebody says, did you know? But the one thing which struck me was the linear nature. Like, considering that most of these pieces have been found pre-Celtic Tiger, so we can't turn around and say it was roads, modern roads. But are we able to actually say that it's maybe to do with slaying, the ancient roads? You've got the Sliemore running across, the Sliemalochra, of course, which runs straight up, the Sliasal and all the rest of it. So there's something interesting going on here, especially the road from this area over to Galway, and of course heading up. It's also interesting to notice that we've got the lowest statistical representation of tack, of course, outside of the Latam metalwork zone, which of course Richard Warner has described more erudite than I ever could, to who I think this research owes a massive, massive amount of thanks to, along with, of course, Professor Barry Raftery's work. So from the Roman side, I was interested because, of course, Laari, the late Iron Age and Roman Ireland stuff was, whenever I was undergrad, it was absolutely mind-boggling. And this is something which the jury's out on as to how connected it is. But I do happen to believe that there is, and we're going to come to that in a few moments, that there is a very, very strong Roman influence to what's going on. Now, I'd said about, just to show you a couple of pictures, if you were using British tack of the time, it's one of these. They're very beautiful looking, but well, if you want to tune in April, I'm talking to the Royal Archaeological Society about how problematic these are. They're a form of Waterford, but that's besides, some can be used and some can't. If you're up in North Germany, and this is where it gets quite interesting, your bits are totally different from ours. However, the Y pieces are not. This is one of the drawings of one of my favourite Y pieces from County Offaly. It was found in 2000. Beautiful things. And this is a German Kellberg. They are still actually, and if you go to Schloss Gottorf Museum in Schleswig, you'll see that these are actually still being used right through into the Middle Ages. So fond they were. Now this one's a wee bit different because it actually has got a solid frame like the Irish Y piece. These, remember, you saw how they fitted on one of the earlier slides. This one is, say, from Thorsberg, the Thorsberg Moor depositions, which they were very kind and let me examine. These tags had a rein running through your neck railing again, and this attaches just like the Y piece onto the bridle underneath. So there was something, whenever Richard Hayworth in 1969 and 1970s said that there was some sort of funky connection going on between Germanic material and Irish Y pieces, he was actually bang on the money. Just one thing to actually add to what he had said. Most Kellbergs are flexible in the fact that they can accommodate any size of horse. The Irish stuff is bespoke. That tells me quite a lot about the people who are using them and the fact that these people can afford to have thunder and lightning, their favorite horses, can have this equipment made specially for them. Whereas the Germanic the riders are a lot more opportunistic in the fact you might get a horse that was a bit bigger at the next raid than the one that you had. So you want to be able to fit it up okay. So it tells me something very different about the two cultures. Then there was quite an amazing situation where a vicus up in northern Britain was being excavated. And one night on Twitter, I was asked to please go and watch the video of what was happening. And they pulled up basically a hybrid between the Irish Y-piece and the German Kilberg. And it's along the, this is this fella here. The paper is being written as we speak between the excavator and myself. As a miraculous piece of luck would have it, this part here did have leather within it. I was straight over to the university, grabbed the leather sample, brought it back, and by that evening, it was in Queen's University Chrono Centre, being radiocarbon dated. It won't surprise anybody to know it came up as being in the middle of the 1st century AD, which is contemporary with the Y-pieces and contemporary with Thorsberg as well. Whenever you've got an awful lot of these the mercenaries, I suppose you would call it, or the allies of the Romans. Romans weren't very good on horseback themselves, so they used people who came from horsey backgrounds as their cavalry and reconnaissance. So to find this in a vicus maybe wasn't really that surprising, but it was very delightful. Also, this was found down in Gloucestershire. It's the bottom of an Irish 2A piece, the lovely decorated part at the bottom. So that was really, really exciting to find as well. And the British Museum were fabulous. They called in the metal detectors who had found it. And he was like, oh, I've got Irish family. So he was really chuffed about that as well, and knowing that he had contributed massively. The photograph, by the way, is from the Portable Antiquities Scheme, who have been absolute heroes through all of this. So to show you the different shapes of these Irish bits, the type A, I didn't change Barry Raftery or Richard Hayworth's classifications because you know something, if it's not broken, don't fix it. They do the job. They're absolutely bang on the money. The most basic is these, type A. There's only a couple of these found. They're quite like a lot of the European ones. And then they start getting these funny little lumpy bits. Then you start to see it stretch out and develop this sort of outward facing cheek guard, I suppose you would call it. Remember, this part here is outside the horse's mouth and this part is inside. By the time you reach the type D, you've got some really odd designs happening. You've got these sort of odd castings of folds. You've got this almost arched, and both Martin Jope, the great Martin Jope, and Richard Warner had noted that there's something quite Romany in style going on here, whether it's dragonesque or like the fibula that you would get or whatever. There's something definitely interesting going on. And then by the time you reach the type E, it reaches maximum decoration. You've got lots and lots of folds on the inside, and they become very pronounced. The mouthpiece outside extends right out. And again, remember, this part is inside the horse's mouth. And what I can say is there is nothing across Europe in the ancient world like these at all. These are instantly recognizable. The one piece that exists over in Romania, I believe is probably, I don't think it could ever have been actually used on a horse's mouth. I think that it has been a symbol, maybe an Irish unit or whatever. So that's these. So we're starting to see a lot of connections that started to develop with the kind of designs. Now, I want you to take a really, really good look at this piece because it's I've been allowed to use the image, and also it's very, very beautiful. and it's just in such good nick. We think, by the way, it's from Roscommon, possibly Tusk. Dr. Ronald O'Flynn as well has been doing a huge amount of heroic work in trying to piece together where some of the unprovenance pieces are. And I really look forward to seeing if he can manage to find this one, because it's one of my favourites. But you'll notice here, you've got these folds, these little residual folds starting to take shape, and they go right down and right along. And then you've got all this beautiful Latin derivative work on the outside. So the warning, this part contains Roman talismans. If you're a certain age, you'll probably know what's coming. I wouldn't say it's not safe for work, but we're going to deal here a little bit with fascinum, the Roman good luck charms that look like phalluses or phalli. So we've got this lovely piece here with its folds, yeah. And I'm not going to labour the point. There's lots of fascinum all over the place. You can look at them anywhere you like. That one's a stone carving that's in the Met Museum in New York. And just for fun, I turned this little fascinum charm upside down. And I think we can see that the style is quite remarkable. So we've got something quite interesting going on here, that you've got very, very Roman influence of shape. So what does this exactly mean? Because remember, there's no hint of bits like these in the Bronze Age. We don't have any history like Europe. These things suddenly appear. It's as if you went out into a field that once had shown nothing but bicycle chains and found pieces of a Ferrari. So what we're looking at here is, of course, the map of by Ptolemy of the 2nd century AD. So what we've actually got is the outer part of the mouthpiece of these beautiful bits is decorated with Latin derivative, very Irish, very, I don't want to use Celtic word, but you know what I mean. But the inside is styled, no matter what way you look at it, in a very, very Roman way. And there's a story, and I'm quoting you here from Tacitus's Agricola. One of the Irish petty kings, who had been forced to fly from the fury of a domestic faction, was received by the Roman general, and under a show of friendship, detained to be of some use on some future occasion. I have often heard Agricola say that a single legion with a moderate band of auxiliaries would be sufficient to complete the conquest of Ireland. Now, as a North Belfast girl, the first thing I'm going to go is, aye, you're hard enough. Come on, bring it on. But they don't. And whenever I talk to Mike Bishop, probably one of the best Roman experts that I know of anyway, over in St Andrews at a conference, he had said, these things cut out being made just as the Marcomannic Wars start kicking off. And I remember being at a lecture with Richard Warner once, whenever I was an undergrad, who said he didn't think that these things were being made, the ironwork or the metalwork was being made much after 150 AD. Well, the Marcomannic Wars are around 180 AD. So yeah, by the way, the story of the disgruntled Irish prince, he's in the Annals of the Four Masters and other texts. He's referred to as Tugal Teachmar, the legitimate leader. It sounds more like a title than anything else. And it's the same story. If we go with Tacitus, then it's probably around about AD 80, in which this story is starting. Rome never invades, but the elite, if there was, in fact, if these people returned, as the stories say they did, they came back with ideas that were very, very different, because where the story says that Teachmar had to go, his mum had to go on the run, she was from northern Britain. Whenever he was born, then he would have been brought up as a nice Romano-British chieftain's grandson, with all the cherry picking that goes on with the northern British as to how much Roman they want to actually adopt and how much they don't want to adopt, which I think David Dunworth actually goes into better than I do in this overview. Anyway, so I'm trying to get to the little slide here. Why can I not move my slide? Oh, come on. Help. Here we go. So, are we in fact looking at a dual identity of the elite that came back? Not fueled by Rome, but cocky enough that they had the firepower that they could handle it themselves. Or maybe some friends of theirs who were now retired from the Roman cavalry, that they come over just for fun as well. People migrate all the time. Ireland, dual identities, happens all the time. We know that that period of time was a complex and insecure period. Rome was at the door and an elite with close connections to the empire. There was trade and communications all across Europe. Horses are a very desirable commodity to be as good, and they would want to be as good as those across the water. And are we in fact looking at an elite who want to keep up with what possible relatives and allies had under Roman occupation? And the fact is, maybe those who had been here after that civil war that's recorded in the annals of the Four Masters, perhaps not everybody felt that comfortable with them actually being there. So they wanted to hide the symbol of good luck inside the horse's mouth. They knew it was there. The horse knew it was there. Anybody who's tacking up knew it was there. But on the outside, you're only seeing the very, very Irish stuff. It was an interesting thing to be working on during the time of watching identities being contested so much, of course, through the dreaded Brexit, etc. And it was an interesting thing to just sit and watch and see how people felt about their own identities and how they would express them and what symbols they would use. And it certainly gave me a lot of food for thought. So that's the overview of some of the findings. And where do we go next? Well, there's work underway straight away on early medieval Ireland, the sequel to this in many ways. This project has been funded by the Royal Irish Academy. We know there's something interesting going on because a lovely paper that Professor Edna O'Sullivan of UCD did referred to the early medieval, again, had this fear of the evil eye being preyed on horses. And there was actually a word in medieval Irish, which I couldn't possibly get my tongue around or do justice, that described that. There's some really, I can't offer any major spoilers yet, but what I can say is there are some really, really interesting things coming through in this just at the moment. And running at the same time, last year I was a very lucky girl. I was also funded by the Society of Antiquaries of Scotland to look at Scottish equitation. The strange thing is both early medieval Irish and Scottish are pretty much running parallel with each other. And especially some of these results have been providing answers to do with pre-Roman Iron Age British bits, long before the Irish were actually doing anything of that nature. So if you want to tune into that talk to see how it all joins up, that'll be on live on the 13th of April, and it's advertised at the moment on the Royal Archaeological Institute's website. After that, who knows? This has been the gift that keeps giving. There's the book, if anybody's interested in it. And all I can say now is thank you. And anybody has any questions, I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Rena. That was absolutely fascinating. I'm sure there must be loads of questions. So anybody? Anyone? No?
Any questions?
Yeah, well, just a couple of things, Rena. How common were horses at this time? I mean, and you think of this kind of high quality, high status tack. You think of a royal site, say, I don't know, Dunelnia or Owen Maco or somewhere like that. How many warriors or high status people there would have access to a horse? What are we looking at? Are we looking at a cavalry? Are we looking at horses that are used on parade? Or what do you think?
My personal feeling about it, Rory, is I don't think horses were that common. Maybe small ones were, which are being used for pack animals. But as for riding horses or the occasional driving horse, whenever they're able to afford bespoke things, and the one thing which comes through is so many of these, both bits and Y pieces, are so singular. you can identify the workshops after a while, and you can see how they're doing wee twists to make things look in certain ways for whoever has contracted them to make them. Unlike Germany, where everything was purely utilitarian, these things seem to be being made to fit. So no, I don't think that there's a lot of horses about at that stage, or at least not quality horses that these people are riding. You know, I would love it if somebody could suddenly find a pack of horse remains from that period of time, that then I could start begging for funding to radiocarbon date them. Yeah. Also stable isotope and various bits and bobs like that. There is work underway for some of the early medieval stuff on that. But with Iron Age, we have no idea. It's the only quantity.
Yeah. I mean, I've been a field archaeologist going on 40 years this year, and one of the things people ask me is, what would you like to find? And having been brought up with all the Cuchulainn myths and all the various other myths, and knowing about the dreaded seabirds, chariot burials in Yorkshire and France, I would love, it comes from the conclusion that before I retire, I would love to dig a chariot burial in Ireland. But the question is, what do you think that this tack was used for in the late Iron Age in Ireland?
Very much riding, very much.
Single riders.
Single ride. Well, I mean, just somebody sitting on a horse. Yeah. With chariots or vehicles of any kind, I can tell you that yes, there's one piece in particular which I personally believe is the decorative topping of a linchpin, and that's the case. It tallies very closely with a particular style of Y piece. I'm hoping that we can get I'm working with Brian Scott on this actually, because it's him that kept nagging and niggling and niggling. We've only got two things that could suggest that there was one of these may be in fact native-ish, and the other is it could either be something that was brought over as scrap or was brought over as a gift, and that's out towards Galway. Again, that's one of the hot spots for tack. If there's carts or vehicles, they could in fact be driving them with one horse. That again, it has to be said, could produce even wear on the bits. But no, you got to remember that there's nothing to suggest that we're dealing with the Cuchulainn stuff. That's very much early medieval. It's brilliant because it gives us a picture into what's going on whenever it's being written down and all the rest of it. But it's not the late Iron Age. The late Iron Age, they're taking much more from what a nice Roman boy does, somebody who's comfortably off. And in fact, it's much more to do with riding, because Britain hangs on to chariotry, like grim death. They won't let it go whenever Europe has moved on to horse riding because it looks great. The Romans, of course, have moved on to horse riding because it looks great and it's impressive looking. And you've got your cavalry and all the rest of it, your Bataviae, etc. But Britain clings like grim death to chariotry. There's even more to that one than meets the eye. Yes, I would love, I know the legend about the chariot burial that supposedly had the pipeline go through it down somewhere along the East Coast. I know that legend. I'd love to know if there's any truth in it, or whether it was Kurt or something. But yeah, I hope you get it, Rory. And
I hadn't heard about that. Yeah, it would be lovely to discover one just before whatever stage I retire in years to come. But with some other questions, Brina, thank you for answering that. From Louise Moffat, a quick question about the find locations. You mentioned some of the bits were recovered from early ecclesiastical sites,
yeah,
with ecclesiastical site finds concentrated in a particular region or scattered across Ireland.
Just scattered across. You'll get nothing. You really won't find anything. Whenever back in 2002, I think, or 2004, Richard Warner did his paper upon the cowboys versus the crop sharers, the divide of the metalwork zone. You really won't find anything further south of that. All the ecclesiastical centres would be those that are in the northwest three quarters of the island.
Okay.
There's no general pattern I think it's something that Ronald Flynn has been very interested in looking at as well. So it's great.
Yes, okay. Another question from Margaret Tolson. She says, Rena had mentioned early on a difference between the wear patterns of horses in Ireland versus Britain, referring to the riding of horses as more common in Ireland. I wasn't sure I understood. Could she expand?
Okay. Britain follows very much its own kind of bits that it's using. If anybody's horsey, if I say that it's a form of very early Waterford bit, in which you see where you've got a very long central link and these very short cannons which curve round inside the mouth. So needless to say, because the pressure on them is different, you're going to get very different use wear on those.
Right.
On Irish stuff, it's absolutely comparable to what you're seeing. If I was to actually take down a number of bits from a local riding school and throw them down on the table and say, let's compare them with what we've got from Westmeath, you'd see exactly the same type of use wear. So yeah, they're two different kinds of styles of tacking up, basically, and they work for different reasons. And they're two very different ways of approaching things.
Okay. Thank you for that, Rena. So another question from Stephen Cameron this time. Excellent talk, Rena. I see on your finds map, Larne's marked up. Is that the Tower Road find or another one?
Sorry, what was that? I didn't hear the last part.
I see on your finds map, Larne is marked up on it. Is that the Tower Road find or another one?
If I remember, I don't think it's actually marked up as Larne per se. Let me go back. Along that whole area, there's a huge amount of horsiness. I'm trying to whiz back here. Stephen, is this the map?
I think it probably is.
Possibly is. From up here, your Roman stuff, I think these are actually around Cushendun direction. And then, of course, you've got the mouth of the Ban, etc., coming down. That's why you've got that extended heat spot on that map, because it has to take in quite a wide area. You can see an idea of the cluster there, as to how meaningful they are as well. There's stuff around Glenbuck, Glenariff. Stephen, you've got the catalogue. There's so much. There's nothing directly in Larne, town of Larne itself, but there is outside of it.
Okay, thank you, Rena. Another question then from Patricia McGovern. Why have no horse bones been found, especially if tack was found in peat bog?
I don't think they were chucking the horses into the bogs. If they were, then it would have been great. I think that the deposition of tack has been an awful lot more complex. I think a lot of them that's found in commonage probably are closer to what we saw over the past 2 years. I brought a couple of years, not a couple, God, it is a couple of years now. Oisin, my other half, and myself went down to Ballyknoe. I wanted to show him Ballyknoe Stone Circle. And as you walk down the wee hallway down to it, we noticed that there were all these like wee shrines where people had died of COVID, and they had put wee mementos to them going down. And there, some of the things had like their favorite things on it or whatever. And it's a very, very personal memorabilia. And you see this kind of thing as well. If you travel right through Ireland, you've got like those wee roadside crosses or wee roadside benches and all sorts of things. I think that with a certain amount of them, that's probably what you're looking at. Maybe it was where somebody did die. Maybe it was a memorial. Maybe it was their family territory. There's a lot of monuments that have gone, earthworks, etc., have been ploughed over 2,000 years. We have no way of knowing, but certainly they're not chucking horses into the bog.
that kind of feeds into the next question from Dr. Eve Campbell, and she's asked, any evidence for horse sacrifice in Iron Age Ireland? Not so far.
Not so far. Is it happening? Weirdly, oh boy, spoiler alert, I'm actually writing a paper at the moment which explores some of the possibilities for the very, very end of the Iron Age as it topples on the early Christian. But hopefully that'll be out fairly this year sometime. But yeah, it's something that has niggled at me because of certain myths, legends, traditions, etc. So all I can say on that one is watch this space. I might have a better idea by Friday. That's all I can say.
Okay, that sounds intriguing, and I look forward to hearing an update on that. Okay, thank you, Rena. And then next question is from David Taylor. That was an amazing talk. Thank you so much, Dr. Maguire. I work with medieval Irish heroic literature, and the general lack of mounted warriors always shocked me. While chariots come up often, just riding on horseback comes up so rarely in the texts. Is there anything going on in the early medieval period that might explain this absence in the literature?
Yes. The horse is a kingmaker in pagan Ireland, for want of a better word. Remember that part of what you do to become king involves ingesting, or maybe doing worse, if you believe I was Jerry. But Geraldus Campensis obviously has horror stories, but he doesn't like the Irish anyway. So we've no idea how true any of his rather colourful narrative actually is. But in the Iron Age, the horse is very much a kingmaker. And then all of a sudden Christianity comes in, and it also tells the British, because I'm going through a lot of stuff with Bede and Gildas at the moment, it's like, don't eat horse flesh. That's what dirty pagans do, you know? And I don't believe it's actually, this guess, for want of a better word, isn't about for the good of your health. I think it's the fact that it's almost like eat my body, drink my blood. It's all a wee bit too close to Christianity. Christianity is very keen to make the horse a beast of burden again, that we use, so you have to harness it. Whereas imagine if you're riding bareback on a horse with real, like, beautiful decorated bridles or even beautiful saddle cloths, you're quite a sight to behold. And your balance, your seat is going to have to be excellent to actually maintain that position. So you're going to look very much as if you're on one with that horse. So you, in fact, symbolically are very much, you're one creature moving together. That's what horse training does. That's what dressage is, for God's sake, you know. But whenever you're looking at what Christianity doesn't want any of that stuff going on. It virtually gets its wee Father Ted placard up and it goes, careful now. And if you don't eat the horse, and you don't, unless you're going to war, and there are carvings on high crosses of people riding on the horses, but it's mostly about driving, because then it does become a beast of burden. And that, I think, that's your big difference. Christianity starting to lay down the law as to how it wants animals viewed.
Okay, thank you. So we have a question from the committees, Anne McDermott. Any chance that there are other artifacts misidentified in museums? A relative of mine found various artifacts when draining a crannog in 1824, including bridle pieces and, quote, a pair of brass spurs, unquote, one of which appears in a drawing in OS memoirs and is almost certainly a Y piece.
Yeah. If your family still have them, talk to me. I'd love to see them. Yeah, remember that antiquarians didn't tend to record exactly where things were kept. They were just pretty things to put on display while you were having a gin and you talk to your other lordly friends about these wonderful pretty things. My chapter 2, the monograph, goes into, with considerable bitterness and saltiness, as to why we have so few provenances, because they were curiosities. Some of the good guys did record everything, and my gratitude goes out through the centuries, but most people didn't, so we've lost so much information as well. It's pretty much the same over in England as well, but so much that isn't identified yet. So yeah, you know, I live in hope. I'm always there to if anybody has any information, contact me through Queen's, and I'll be delighted to examine and hopefully tell you where it all fits in the jigsaw puzzle.
Okay. Thank you, Rena. We've one last question by the looks of it. I don't see any after this. This is from Jim Conway. Oh, well, Annie's just, before I read out Jim's, Annie's just replied, regrettably, the items were all handed in to the landlords, and OS memoirs say that they're all lost. I've made some inquiries, possibility some ended up in Edinburgh. So perhaps you can...
That's the Bell collection. Yep. You may be able to identify them from the catalogue. The white pieces, the catalogue of the white pieces has been available for a number of years on the Emmanuel website. You can actually go into that, but the bits unfortunately are still within the book. But if you want to drop me a note, I'll quite happily go through and tell you if they are up in Edinburgh, because we should be able to identify them, no problem.
Very good, very good. I'll leave that for Annie to contact you, Rena. Very good. It's always nice to kind of get more information and move things along.
Well, I mean, that's it. I mean, it's a whole story. It's everybody's story. There's one piece in the Bell collection which is supposed to be found in Dungannon, a bog in Dungannon, and it's particularly weird because I'm not quite sure even what century it's from, to be quite honest with you. And it was found apparently along with a clatter of stuff. We think it might be a decorative bit, or possibly something that was put on display. Could possibly be part of a statue. You know, the way the Roman statues are like have the beautiful horsey mouthpieces and stuff. I'm always keen to talk to anybody about what they got.
Very good. Well, that's nice to make that connection. Jim Conway had asked, he says, Armagh and Lough Neagh have a lot of horse mythology. To which epoch would this originate?
I think the paper had said it was written about horse sacrifice. Yep. I know the story about the giant horse that takes the two lovers away from running away from abusive relationship. Angus says about take the horse and it'll ride you straight up to safety. It stops at Lough Neagh. They're told to turn it around, shoot it back. It doesn't. It does a pea, and that pea becomes Lough Neagh. It was a very big horse, and there is that. And it brings us down to the title of okay. You see in early medieval names and the annals of our masters, you see the name Oki used over and over and over again. I think it's a title. I don't think it's a personal name. And yet again, Lough Neagh itself comes from Lough Oki, the lake of the horses. There's so much to pick up. I'm only one person. I keep hoping I can talk somebody who's into doing folklore into looking at that side. For also, there's a huge amount of landscape archaeology because horses need a certain kind of landscape to graze on. So that would be a paleo environmental project for people. Hotspots, for example, where Jim has mentioned, yeah, they're the first places I'd be looking at because the evidence is there from the hotspots. But yeah, there's so much mythology. We can't discount them.
There's a certain amount of folklore about horses on the website. The Billidus, the Journal of the Folklore Society of Ireland, journal has been published since 1927, and all their journals up to the last couple are available to consult on JSTOR. And I've been through it over the years, and there's quite a lot of folklore and mythology to do with horses on that website, which you can view for free. So it's a very useful site. A lot of people just saying thank you, Fionnuala, Carson Williams, Catherine, James McCoy, Liz Curtis, and McDermott, thanking you all, and on behalf of the whole committee, the US committee. Rena, that was a fascinating talk. Thank you very much. I don't see any other questions.
That's okay.
Any last questions before we let Rena away? Now, you're saying that the work is ongoing, so
Yeah.
we will get you back if you're available in November for our Discovery 2022 conference.
It's a
maybe
date.
get-
Definitely. The Irish early medieval stuff, which I was actually going to do, but Sullivan talked me into it. And I'm glad he did, because it's full of unexpected things at the moment, totally unexpected. And you're starting to see a lot of peculiar similarities between what's going on in Scotland, etc. But also Ireland has got very much its own identity at that stage. But just there's going to be a lot of material coming through. So don't worry, there'll be papers, and I hope that
it'd be lovely to get an update on what you talked about tonight and the new stuff you're going to be looking at over the next 9-10 months. So our Discovery conference isn't until November, so fingers crossed. We'll get you back, and there'll be more really interesting stuff as well. So on behalf of the society and the committee, we really appreciate your talk, Rena. Thank you very much. The monograph looks brilliant, so I recommend that people go out and have a look at it or buy it as you can. So thank you, Rena. And our next lecture is taking place on Monday, the 22nd of February, and that's Dr. Cormac McSparran, Better Pass Boldly into That Other World, the Dead in the Irish Early Bronze Age, the Rituals and the Society That Made Them. So that's our next lecture, 22nd of February. But just to close off tonight, so saying a very big thank you to you, Dr. Maguire, for your talk tonight. And you're allowing this to be recorded and put on Facebook, so people can rewatch it, or if anyone hasn't been able to make it tonight and they are interested, tell them that's on to go to the UAS website, and they'll be able to watch this fascinating talk. So thank you, Rena, and night.
Night to you. I don't think I've been on the library this late since I was undergrad. But thanks very much.
Good night.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Good night,
Night.
Night.
Good night. Thank you.
Bye.
Night, Rena.
Yeah,
Good
good
night.
night.
Good night. Excellent lecture.
See you, everybody.
See you.
Night.
Bye.
Bye.
All right.
Bye.